Hi, in this video I do the first man critique. Hi, I'm Adam and welcome to First Man Photography, the channel that will help you take your photography to the next level. I now have the Dot Raw t-shirts for sale in a variety of colours and sizes. Head over to firstmanphotography.com, check them out at the Raw store, and if you like what you see, pick one up. First Man Photography has been going for about 10 months now, and it really has been a privilege to create this content and then get the comments and feedback from you. I like to give as much back as I possibly can to my audience, and many of you have contacted me asking me to look at your work and give it some critique. And I've been happy to do so, but unfortunately I'm now getting to the point where I'm not going to be able to keep doing that and create 2 videos a week and do everything else that I've got going on. There just isn't the time. So I think what I'm going to do now is, from today, try and combine the 2 things of creating a video and doing a critique, and combining them into a critique video. And this is the first one of those videos. If it's your work then I'm looking at, then great. But if not, you should still get some great value from these videos. As we go through someone else's work, we can pick the good points out, have a look at the stuff that needs working on, and really get into some good constructive feedback to help them and yourselves take your photography to the next level. Today's video has come about because I was contacted by Craig. Craig's been shooting for a little while now, and he reached out to me to cast a critical eye over his work. He's really shown some wisdom in doing this because he was concerned that he was being told now that he's a really good photographer and people are loving his work, but he recognised that most of this was coming from his family and friends. It's a really easy trap to fall into when you first start shooting, and it's a trap generally that people fall into, and that is believing everything you hear, and especially when it's a compliment. It's important to recognise, particularly with family and friends, that they may only want to give you positive feedback, because either they don't want to upset you and they want to encourage you, or secondly, they might just not have the knowledge to be able to give you the constructive feedback that you're looking for. So with that in mind, let's get into the computer and we'll have a look at Craig's work. Okay, so we go straight into Flickr, and this is the first image that Craig has submitted. The thing that strikes me first about this one is, well, firstly his watermark, which I'm not a massive fan of, but it's not overly intrusive, so I'm happy with that. Use a watermark or don't, it's up to you. I personally don't, because I'm not concerned about people stealing my work, but that is entirely up to you. I'm struck by this image because it feels just a little bit underexposed for me. There's sort of dark areas here. I don't know, maybe it's a cloud or something, I don't know. It is a really interesting building, so I can see why Craig's gone ahead and shot this building. And then secondly, it just doesn't quite feel right because the tip of the building up here just gets a little bit too close to the top of the frame. I think it could be vastly improved just by framing up a little bit, so you have a bit more sky above this point of the building. I think that would be slightly better composition as the edges of the building here and here start to come a little bit more towards the bottom of the frame. I understand wanting to get the different sort of tones, the different shapes in here and here. You could go a little bit wider, that might solve it. But it's not my favourite image. Not bad though, and I understand what he's trying to achieve and the interest in this building. So let's go on to the next one. Now this is a much nicer image. You're immediately hit by the beautiful colour involved here. You've got the sort of pinks, the purples, the sort of more orange light from the street lights, and you've got that sunset sky in the background, and it really is quite a nice image. He's got a nice high vantage point and it overlooks Denver. He's using the Sony a6000 for this one, and I really do like it. The only thing that I would like to see is just a little bit tighter in on the city here, because I just don't feel that the car park here is really adding anything to the image, and the road here at the bottom, and particularly this street lamp right in front of your face here. I don't think that's adding anything. So having just a look at it, I wouldn't crop it particularly from this point, but if you were framing the image to start with, I would want to see a frame something like, if we draw this with the crop tool, or the snipping tool, sorry, just draw the box like this, and I'm looking at somewhere around there. and you'd sort of end up with an image a little bit more like this. And I think as framing up, that works a little bit better. But overall, it's still a great image. I like the processing that's been done, and I do like this image. So on to the next one, and this is, where are we? A sunset, city being overtaken by industry, and I'm guessing this is Denver again. And again, we're with the Sony a6000, we're f16 and 1/6 of a second. So we must be on a tripod for this, with a shutter speed that slow, but we've got lots of detail in this shot. Again, it isn't my favourite shot. There is lots of interest going on. You've got these industrial works here, the city in the background, which I like, and then that sort of sunset with these really interesting clouds here. For me, the composition isn't quite right though, because this area down here with the water, the grass, and this bit of dirt road, it really isn't adding anything to the composition for me. And with this, the way this rail track is coming into the image, it kind of draws my attention to this area a little bit when you start looking at the image, because all the lines are pointing in this direction and you just get sort of caught up in this area. I don't know whether it would have been possible with where he was stood, but I think a good composition here, if you could get somewhere looking down both these railroads with you sort of positioned in the middle here somewhere, if there is such a bridge. I don't know if you can do that, but that would add some interest with both. You then have a sort of V shape coming out of the bottom of your frame into the city, into the sunset, hopefully, if you've got a wide enough angle and the sun is setting in the right place. But there's lots of interest, so definitely Craig clearly has a keen eye for a good scene, so that's something really to work on. We're not far off having a great shot here, I think. So on to the next one. Now this is back to that Denver cityscape, and this is pretty much a lot like the crop that I was talking about from the first image, and I really like the colour and the tones that Craig's achieved on this. It's almost a perfect image for me. Lots of interest going on with this fairground, the roller coaster, which is really nice in the foreground there. You've got the city in the background, which looks great. You've got these beautiful tones in the sunset, and really I love the sort of blue tone that Craig has pulled out of this image in post-processing. I like the frame. The only thing I don't like about it is this tower being right on the edge of the frame. It's just slightly distracting, and I'd like to give this tower some context with just a little bit more of the sky and the foreground in the shot. And if that was the case, frame it up a little bit like I sort of said on that first shot of this scene, and I really think you're onto something pretty special. I'd quite happily have a shot like this on my wall, especially if I'm from the Denver area, because I really think it's got a lot going for it. I just, like I say, just wish it was a little bit wider, but that's easily solved, I imagine, if Craig revisited this scene. Okay, on to the next one, and we have here, when I first looked at this image, I didn't actually notice the birds in the tree. Looking at the title, obviously he's called it Bird Tree. It says this island was basically commandeered by the local cormorants, and indeed you can see the cormorants as you zoom in onto the trees here. I like the processing he's done again. What are we on now? What camera? There's no EXIF information on this one, but it seems to be a slightly long exposure because we've got a little bit of movement and smoothing out of the water there that really adds to that image. As you know, I'm a fan of long exposure anyway. So this image is working well for me. The only thing that I would like to see is I don't think, for me, the main attraction of this picture is the birds in the trees. And this log in the foreground and the sort of darkened corners here aren't really adding anything to the image for me. When shooting this, I would have just edged your composition up a little bit, so you have this sort of line here of the shoreline on the other side of the water, sort of on that bottom rule of or that bottom third of the image, using your rule of thirds, and then you just have the tops of the trees with a little bit of sky above it then, because you've got a lot of drama in the sky, which is adding to the image, I think. And you just have a little bit of sky and then nicely framing the trees, and you'd have your attention fully drawn to the trees and the birds in the tree, rather than having it distracted by the foreground here, because the water would then be your foreground and you'd still have plenty of interest with the reflection, the movement in the water, and then it would draw you straight into the birds in the trees. Oh, I do like the image. It's good. I like the processing. It works well for the image. Just a little adjustment on the composition, and that would be really, really nice. On to the next one. Now, when I first looked at this shot, I didn't really know what Craig was trying to achieve. And to be honest, it isn't my favourite. Tree on Black is the name of it. And as I read the description here, I start to get a feeling of what Craig was trying to achieve. And he said, such a neat shot of this couple walking by a tree next to the path. Because the image as it is composed, I don't think the couple are really adding anything to the image here. If it's just a shot of the tree, because the tree sort of dominates the picture. So I'm immediately thinking it's a shot about the tree. But it seems that Craig was sort of, the story he was wanting to tell was this couple going for a walk under the tree. So with that being the case, I would have sort of zoomed in a little bit or got closer, depending on the camera, the lens you're using, what's he got. And again, no EXIF information, but get in closer and sort of using a composition a little bit like this, something like that, or a little bit wider to get the whole tree in, maybe something like that, just to really make the couple a bit more prominent, because they're just too small at the moment, and I actually think it's detracting from the image as it is. But if that's the story you want to tell, then get in a little bit closer on the couple to really tell that story. I'd also like to see it in colour. I don't think the black and white's particularly working for you here, because the silhouette would be black anyway, and then you just have a little bit more interest with some green here in the grass, and then have a bit of blue and more detail in the clouds if it was in colour. On to the next one. So this is sunrise over water. He says it's a first attempt at a sunrise shot and it's turned out pretty okay. And I've got to agree with him. In this case, it is a nice image. I like the sprinkler here, adding a bit of more interest in the background. And is it a golf course maybe? But it looks good, and the sunrise is incredible. I quite like the composition with the pier or jetty here. I would like to see it a bit more of the jetty, because it looks quite short. I don't know whether he could have moved back a little bit to get a bit more of the jetty in the scene, so it doesn't quite go full width across the frame. But it does still work for me. It's not too bad. The only issue I have is it looks a little bit over processed. You've probably, for me, I think Craig's probably dragged the shadows up a little bit too much on this jetty, so it makes it look a little bit unrealistic. And you can see that in the sort of halo effect you have around the edge of the jetty here, and that just isn't quite working for me. That's really not an effect I like, and it happens on a number of occasions if you increase the sort of exposure or shadows too much in a very dark area, or when you increase the clarity or the sharpness too much in your image, and that can often give you this halo effect. And I find it really distracting in the images, but it just gives that sense that it's slightly over processed. But it is still a good image. Could probably be fixed actually just by using the very same raw file, going back in and just reprocessing that, and you could have a much better image. So on to the next one. So I think it looks like we're back to that industrial area that we had earlier on. And he says it's a dual tone refined, and he's experimenting with different colour tones. So if that's what he's doing with this image, I think it's working pretty well, because I really do enjoy the tones in the image. It's just on the verge, just on the right side of being over-processed. I don't think it is over-processed, but I think if you went any more, it would be. But as it is, I think it's really nice. You've got some really good sort of wooden, copper tones or rusty tones in the rails here. And then some real nice interest in the industrial area, and then obviously that beautiful sunset colours that we have going on in the sky. And then I like the detail of the mountains in the background. It's not my favourite shot because I'm not a massive fan of rail shots. I don't like people taking a risk getting onto the rails. People have lost their lives doing this. I'm not saying Craig was being silly, or I'm sure he knew what he was doing, but some people take a little bit too much risk getting onto the rails, and it's a shot that you see quite a lot anyway. So yeah, they're not my favourite image, but I see what he's trying to do. He's experimenting with colours, and that's what your photography is all about. Trying different things, applying them to the image that you're experimenting with, and then you can take that and take it on to another image where it's really going to start to work for you. So on to the next one, and this is Hiding Sunrise. Such a cool location. Glad I had the chance to capture something here. Colorado is pretty colourful. Now this is a good scene. He's got some really nice colours going on in the sky. It does, again, it looks a little bit over processed for me. It looks like, I don't know whether he's dragged the shadows up a little bit too much in this foreground area. And although I understand what he's doing with this tree, with sort of blocking the sun out, the tree trunk really isn't adding anything to the image for me, and it just becomes a slight distraction. Having vertical lines right in your foreground like that doesn't often work, and I don't think it has in this case. It is an interesting scene. Shift to the left, shift to the right, just remove this log or this tree trunk from your composition, and I think you're going to have a much better shot. A long exposure would work well here as well, just to smooth out the water a little bit and to add some extra movement into those clouds. So nice scene. I see what he's trying to do, but I just don't think it's quite worked in this case. But again, good eye for a good scene, quite clearly. Wow. So this is architecture. Seriously, the shapes, he says, and absolutely that is the case. I think this is that same building that we saw in the first shot, and this is a much, much better composition than we saw in that first one. So you have all the lines sort of heading into this central area. All your attention is being dragged into this area and just getting all the details and the different shapes on each side. The sun is obviously hitting this building here and then reflecting the sunlight off those windows into the side of this building, and that just generates even more interest. A really nice shot. I also like the tones that he's got going on. Really interesting, really nice image, and really showing some skill. Here Craig has used the Sony A7R Mark II, so a really serious piece of kit as well. So I would hope to see some really good images from Craig, and this certainly is a good one. You see lots of interesting architecture shots, similar to this, where it's been a long exposure, so you can get some real decent interest in the sky if you've got clouds going across the top, and that's a way that taking a great image like this and possibly taking it to the next level with a bit of movement in the sky with a long exposure. On to the next one, and again another architecture shot, washed out, made me think of looking at sandstone on dunes, and again I really like this image as well. Got a really nice composition on this building with lots of interesting shapes. I like the curve in this one compared to the straight lines here, and they're all pointing into the center of the frame, and it's a really nice image. Like I was saying in the last image, you'd get some really nice, interesting, add some more interest to an image like this with a long exposure if you had some clouds in the sky. I actually think it looks like it was a sunny day with some of the sort of harsher shadows here, and it looks like the sun reflecting directly off this window. So I'm assuming he has taken the blue. This would have been a blue sky, and it's gone to white. It actually now looks like it's an overcast sky when you first look at it, but I think it probably is a blue sky with the black and white or the mono treatment. It is a nice image. I would like to see that again with some cloud interest in here. But as it stands, I do like it, and it's a shot Craig should be proud of, particularly with that good composition. So all in all, that feels like a really good little portfolio that Craig's put together. I particularly like this one. I love the post-processing done on this one, and the combination of these two shots, you've got an absolutely killer shot here. There's some real skill in this shot here. You've got a really interesting scene there. Just needs that composition up a little bit, like I said. There's lots of skill shown in here, and nice detail. You're capturing those sunsets and sunrises really nicely and bringing out detail in that sky really nicely, and then showing some real skill in this shot here and real nice composition in this one here. So I think the portfolio that you should be proud of so far. Hopefully you can pick up some tips and really take some more shots. I'm looking forward to seeing more from you, Craig, so you really should be pleased with yourself, and yeah, I think you're on the right track. So that's Craig's work, and he's actually got a really interesting story because he's in the process of moving from the US to China. So I think his portfolio and his work is going to have a very interesting story in the near future as he tells the story of what he's up to while he's out there. Go ahead, give him some love. I'll put some links down below in the description for you to follow him. If you'd like me to critique your work, head over to firstmanphotography.com, hit the link in the menu, and then put 10 of your best images into a Flickr group, and then copy and paste the link of that group into the form on the site. To get the ball rolling and give a little bit more back to you again, I'm going to give a free .raw t-shirt away to the first 5 people that submit to having a photo critique done. I hope you enjoyed this video though, and if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe to the channel. There's videos going up on a Wednesday and a Sunday, and I'll see you on another video very soon. I'm Adam, this is First Man Photography, out.